Now here's another versus video that I'm looking forward to do. Mainly, these two episodes have both shows' characters facing off each other involving cooking and robotics. And for me personally, I can't think of a better way to do this type of versus video involving Lincoln Loud, Linso, Rosa, Ryan competing against Breakfast Bot, Todd, Lisa, and Sid. It may be a weird way to think about it, but at this point, we're probably not going to see a video like this anytime soon, considering that the Casagrandes came to an end, and when it comes to the Loud House, they're probably going to have another episode that is similar to this, but let's be real, I'm pretty sure it won't be able to have any competition, since that the episodes involving the Casagrandes are low. Well, compared to the Loud House that has 7 seasons. Forks and Knives Out and Kick Some Butt have this ultimate similarity that even though that both episodes are completely different when it comes to cooking and robotics, I have to admit, these two episodes made me appreciate the creativity of what these two episodes can do when it comes to the Loud House facing off the Casagrandes, and with Kick Some Butt coming out first, it really feels like that they were way ahead of thinking of this idea, while Forks and Knives Out came out 2 months after this episode. But when it came to my followers on Twitter, they expressed their opinions on this episode and a huge retcon that really made this episode difficult for them to enjoy, but I'm gonna get to that later. In Forks and Knives Out, Linsa is participating in kitchen combat, and considering that Luann is busy, Lincoln is Linsa's partner, and they're up against Rosa and Ryan. Now, Guy Glazer, who is the host of Kitchen Combat, wants competition between Linsa, Lincoln, and Ryan and Rosa. So in order to have some competition, he tries everything, and I mean everything, to have these two teams go at each other, mainly competing for a new kitchen, and also a refrigerator that's also a robot. This is basically expert level of desperation, but I'm gonna talk about Guy Glazer much later. In robotics competition, it's mainly a qualifier. Well, Sid and Lisa's robots, Breakfast Bot and Todd, manages to qualify, while the rest of the competition ended up losing. If I'm gonna be honest with you, if we ended up having that for a Loud House episode rather than having two teams facing off each other, it would have been predictable. Though then again, this episode's style of competition is understandable considering that there are multiple robots that we've come across, mainly the robot that Vito has in this episode. For me personally, these two episodes' plots have the most similarities when it comes to the characters. Like, when it came to how the characters interact from these two episodes, it really shows that they're close to each other, and yet at the same time, they won't be able to have competition with each other because they're that close with each other. Granted, it may be confusing considering that in Kick Some Butt, it could be the first time that Sid met Lisa for the first time, but who knows? Granted, Sid had read the newspapers involving Lisa, but from my knowledge, Kick Some Butt is probably the first episode where they actually meet for the first time. When it came to Sid's situation, well, she just wants to prove a point in front of her mother, I need to be real with the retcon that they caused. I'm fully aware that this had the same issues from the main series of the Loud House, and I totally understand it. And for me personally, after Zoo Emergency, which I talked about nearly 3 months ago, I felt like that this should have been connected to that episode when it comes to the support with other characters. Mainly Becca showing her support towards Sid rather than giving Adelaide all the attention. I'm going to assume that Becca isn't into electronics as much as Sid, and when it came to Adelaide's hobbies, she's probably into her hobbies more than Sid, but for me personally, it's most likely the fact that they just want to have conflict in this, but at the same time, even if they had Sid's father in all this, I'm pretty sure that they would have done it a lot more different compared to how Becca was portrayed in this episode. I mean, if that type of scenario happened in Forks and Knives Out, well, the audience are mostly the families of the Loud family and the Casagrandes, it would probably be a lot more awkward considering that the two families are just trying to hang out with each other all the while that they're on a game show. Well, the host, Guy Glazer, wants competition in combat. If you ask me, it really feels weird when you take into consideration that robots that are supposed to be in combat is not really for combat and mostly about what the robot can do than the other robot, while all that is taking place in the Forks and Knives Out episode. You know, considering that Lisa was bound to win in this robotics competition, it really feels like that if all those elements, mainly Lisa and Todd, were being Lin So's sous chef or partner in that scenario, I'm pretty sure that Lisa would probably still win, because even though that she isn't a chef, it doesn't change the fact that she can program chef capabilities in Todd. Then again, if you do the other way around, I honestly don't know what would happen if some of the characters appear in the robotics competition. The possibilities are confusing, but it's worth discussing. Especially since I almost neglect to mention Breakfast Spot. If anyone has Breakfast Spot as their partner, they will either be cheating by getting disqualified, or they would definitely win against any of their opponents in kitchen combat. You know, the more I think about it, if you combine kitchen combat and robotics competition together, you're basically gonna have a robotic chef basically doing all the work for you, and completely having odds against the other robotic chef that could be either better or least better than him or her. I'm just being honest with you. The more I think about this topic, the more I realize that these two episodes can instantly go together in some other capacity. Okay, let's talk about Guy Glazer, who appeared in another Season 6 episode involving Lin So. Mainly the fact that Lin So looks into Guy Glazer's critiques a lot more, and for me personally, judging of how he's portrayed in this episode, it really shows that he's desperate for competition. Like, I may have to watch the Season 6 episode again, but judging of how he's portrayed in this episode, I can instantly tell that he desperately wants to have ratings in some other capacity. And considering that he is desperate to see two teams facing off each other, any other judge in the planet when they host these types of shows would definitely be in this guy's apron. Let's be real. I really felt like that if two teams are basically being nice with each other rather than competing against each other, then I can totally understand the mean of low ratings. Like, at times when you use when you're desperate to do high ratings by doing anything by any means necessary, it's really over-exaggerated. And while this may be over-exaggerated, I can easily tell that you would probably be in Guy Glazer's apron in order to do anything in order to get some ratings. Then again, in robotics competition, there is actual competition since it's mainly every person, or robot in this case, for themselves. Like, whenever I completely see this episode, it sums up a lot that there was actual competition since it's called robotics competition. And when it came to kitchen combat, like, you can argue that combat is similar to competition, but at the same time, the rewards that two teams are willing to fight for in Forks and Knives Out, I'm pretty sure it would have been a lot more chaotic when the participants in Kick Some Butt are that desperate. Though for me personally, judging of how Lisa's life is, just as Sid's is, I'm pretty sure that the lives of what Rosa, Ryan, Lincoln, and Lynn Saw are in Forks and Knives Out are completely different. Though then again, it really makes sense onto how those two competitions are completely different. But let's get back to Guy Grazer. This is one of the few characters that I actually enjoy in the later seasons of The Loud House, which is not saying much considering that some new characters are a lot more difficult to enjoy. Like, his aggression on trying to add some competition in order to get some ratings is a demonstration of how he is so thirsty for ratings and also kitchen combat itself. Like, if I'm gonna be honest, if he acted this way in previous competitions in kitchen combat, I can guarantee you that he pretty much wanted this episode to be just as every single episode that involved two teams facing off each other in kitchen combat. And considering that this led to the Loud family and the Casagrandes relationship being torn apart to the point that even when Lincoln and Ryan were facing off each other, they're really close to each other, which really shows that the development that they got has improved so much since the first season. And considering I've seen so many people complain about this relationship, at this point it's really becoming repetitive. Like, regardless if Ryan still pranks Lincoln from time to time, it doesn't change the fact that people are ignoring this episode. Not kidding. When I first saw people commenting about this episode when it aired back in September, people were instantly complaining about Ryan. Literally nothing else in this episode. You know, considering that that dysfunctionality is non-existent in this episode since two families were being manipulated by Guy Grazer, the hate involving Ryan in this makes even less sense. Bottom line is that I feel like that this entire episode involving these two families sums up a lot of how they improved on their relationship. And at this point, I've already moved on with Ryan's bully persona from the earlier seasons. And to be honest, if I ever see this type of development in Kick Some Butt, I can guarantee you that it would have been a lot more predictable. But then again, this episode came out 2 months before Forks and Knives Out, so I honestly don't know what it would have been like if we had a different type of episode than the one we ended up getting. I guess the only elements I should discuss if I can Kick Some Butt before I wrap things up is mainly of how Becca is being a little flanderized, but then again, knowing full well that every single character gets flanderized, it really feels like that they're trying way too hard to make Becca feel supportive towards Sid in this episode, since this is possibly the final episode we've seen from her until the spin-off series came to an end. And considering that this led to serious consequences, well, Sid placed so many Dixes inside of Breakfast Bot in order to do anything to beat Lisa's robot Todd, which led to Breakfast Bot almost holding her mother Becca. I honestly felt like that Becca's attention towards Adelaide, mainly the fact that she's Lund, is basically a demonstration of the fact that Sid has grown up way too fast. But similar to Lisa, but considering that Lisa is way more longer, I think it kind of explains onto why her family isn't in this episode. Believe me when I say this, that some of my followers on Twitter who DM me discuss on the fact that it literally made no sense for Lisa's family to not be here to support her. If you ask me, for anyone who didn't watch the Lisa episodes, which I have, kind of makes sense onto why that even though that she may miss hanging out with her family, that doesn't automatically mean that she needs her family in episodes like this. Because as far as I'm concerned, Lisa doesn't really need family support. Like, Jimmy Neutron may when it comes to his parents, but when it comes to Lisa in this, it really feels like that she is way more independent than Lori. Though then again, compared to Lori's development, Lisa, being intelligent in the same ways as Jimmy Neutron, has grown up so fast compared to Sid. Which is why I didn't have a problem with Lisa's family not being in this family, considering that she is highly independent compared to Sid. Granted, it may be that Sid's family life is a lot more different compared to the Lau family and the Casagrandes family, but at the same time, considering that some of my followers on Twitter desperately wanted more episodes involving around the Chain family, really says a lot knowing forward that they're into them than I do. I'm just saying, I can instantly tell that there are so many people discussing on what the Casagrandes would have been if it was given the same care as the Loud House when it comes to the seasons of 1 through 3. So, my critiques of these two episodes are mostly mixed, and it's gonna be a lot more confusing knowing full well that the qualities of what these two episodes have would probably be a lot more different, knowing full well that even if the two episodes had the similarities of two shows facing off each other when it comes to cast of characters, the main attraction of these two episodes are mainly a lot more different, knowing full well that the other episode centers around cooking, while Kicks and Bots centers around robots. You know, considering that I have yet to talk about Todd in this, I'm just gonna say this right now. His character is a lot more difficult to get used to, knowing full well that he is part of the family, while Breakfast Bot honestly convinced me that he is somewhat part of the Chain family. You know, the fact that Sid added emotions to Breakfast Bot while Lisa didn't to Todd, and the fact that there was a season 6 episode where Todd had an emotional scene with Lincoln, Lisa, and Clyde, I honestly don't know what to believe, considering that Lisa has friends since she made one in season 2, and the fact that it hasn't been developed since then, aside from a few cameos here and there. I honestly felt like that anyone who works on the show were taking the advice from Nickelodeon way too much. With that out of the way, Forks and Knives Out is the superior episode over the Casagrandes, because for me personally, it really shows that there were actual development, knowing forward that I appreciate the effort on having two characters from the Loud House facing off two characters from the Casagrandes that is actually done right. And even though that at this point it's becoming mostly war with the amount of points of the Loud House is getting over the Casagrandes, keep in mind there's a chance that it may get more points than the Loud House as the year continues. Granted, I can't guarantee it, but we'll just find out. Though then again, the stress that Sid went through and kicked some bots with holding all those sticks is basically the Casagrandes fans feeling that stress out that they're losing against the Loud House. At this point, that's what I'm feeling whenever I make these videos, Sunday after Sunday. With that out of the way, the Loud House Forks and Knives Out gets an 8 out of 10, while the Casagrandes Kick Some Bot gets a 7 out of 10. The only thing I'm actually looking forward to after thinking about it is to see Todd and Breakfast Spot teaming together to face off the refrigerator from Forks and Knives Out. Please tell me that you're highly interested to see a huge refrigerator facing off two robots accompanied by Elisa and Sid, who will instantly get along in some sort of competition. I'm sure as heck I am.